I moved into the apartment 3 months ago. It was small, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Peaceful, quiet, and far from the drama I had run from. Life had finally settled into something that resembled calm. My landlord, Mr. Raj, was a man in his late 40s. Always polite, always distant. We'd exchanged maybe a handful of words since I moved in, rent reminders and maintenance updates, nothing more. So, when he knocked on my door one evening without any notice, I was surprised. It was close to 9 p.m. I peeked through the peephole and saw him standing there, holding a flashlight and wearing an apologetic expression. When I opened the door, he explained there was a water leak downstairs and he needed to check my pipes to locate the source. I wasn't comfortable with unexpected visits, but his tone was calm, and he seemed genuinely concerned. I let him in. He walked in casually, looking around more than necessary. He bent under the sink, fiddled with the pipes, then stood up and wiped his hands slowly. "Seems fine here," he said, but didn't make a move to leave. Instead, he asked how I was adjusting, whether I liked the place. I gave short answers. He smiled warmly, told me it was rare to have tenants who kept the place so tidy. I nodded, unsure of what to say. He finally left after lingering a bit too long near the door. The visit stayed in my head longer than it should have. I couldn't quite place what felt off. He'd been polite, respectful even, but something had changed. It wasn't just the inspection, it was how his eyes stayed on mine just a moment too long, how his words felt personal, not professional. The next day, I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But then he showed up again that weekend, this time saying the electricity box needed checking. I let him in again, warier this time. He talked more, asked about my job, my favorite food, told me about his favorite local restaurant, even offered to bring takeout sometime. I laughed it off, but his eyes didn't leave mine. It wasn't that he was creepy. That would have made it easier to handle. It was the way he mixed kindness with subtle dominance, like he wanted me to feel safe but also owned. That night, I lay in bed replaying everything he said, how close he stood, how his cologne lingered after he left. I told myself it was nothing, just a landlord doing his job. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And still, a small part of me was flattered. I hadn't had that kind of attention in a long time. I didn't know yet that what felt like interest was something far more dangerous. After that night, things changed subtly but surely. Mr. Raj began stopping by more frequently, each time with a different reason, checking the thermostat, looking into a supposed wiring issue, or dropping off building notices that could have easily been slipped under my door. At first, I stayed cautious, answering briefly, avoiding eye contact, but he had a way of breaking down walls without seeming forceful. He spoke gently, asked thoughtful questions, and before long, I found myself responding. He told me about his life, his recent divorce, how lonely it felt coming home to silence. I listened, not out of obligation but because he seemed sincere. One evening, he brought over tea. "My mother's recipe," he said with a half-smile. I hesitated, then accepted. We sat at the edge of my kitchen counter, talking about things I hadn't spoken about in years, music I loved, dreams I once had, how I ended up here. There was something disarming about his presence. He never pushed, just made space for me to speak. I didn't realize how much I missed being heard. He started calling me by my name more often, adding a softness to it that made my stomach flutter. When I had a rough day at work, he noticed immediately. "You look tired," he said. "You need to rest more." There was comfort in his concern. It made me feel visible. One evening, he came with a small bouquet of wildflowers. "For the best tenant I've ever had," he said casually, placing them on the table. I smiled, caught off guard. No one had done that in a while. That night, he stayed a little longer, talking about a movie he watched recently. I laughed at his terrible summary. When I stood to walk him out, he paused at the door, glanced down, then looked at me. There was a moment. He leaned in, not aggressively, just enough to give me the choice. And I let him kiss me. It was short, hesitant. When he pulled back, he looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." But I didn't pull away. I told myself this wasn't wrong. We were two adults, both alone, finding something in the middle of our separate lives. He wasn't just my landlord anymore. He felt like someone who saw through me. We didn't speak about the kiss after that, but his visits became more frequent, more personal. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes just sat with me in silence. I started expecting him. I even dressed a little differently when I knew he might come by. I told myself I was in control, that this wasn't a mistake. But underneath it all, something still didn't sit right. It wasn't fear. It was uncertainty. Why me and why now? Still, I ignored that voice. I wanted to believe in something new, something kind. I had no idea I was walking straight into the arms of betrayal, one smile at a time. Things began to shift the moment I let my guard down. What once felt like warm attention started to feel like routine. His compliments turned into expectations. He noticed everything. If I didn't answer the door quickly, if I didn't smile the same way, or if I seemed distracted. The ease I once felt around him turned into a strange pressure, subtle but present. I convinced myself I was overthinking until the neighbors began to talk. One afternoon, I passed by two tenants whispering near the gate. When they saw me, they fell silent. It didn't take much to figure out I was the subject. Later that evening, an older woman from the second floor approached me. She said, "Be careful, dear. You're not the first." I didn't know what she meant, and she didn't explain. But it stayed with me. Then came the moment that shattered everything. I accidentally overheard him on a phone call. I was coming down the stairs when I stopped, hearing his voice near the parking lot. He was standing beside his car, speaking low. "Just keep the girl happy until the paperwork's done," he said. "She's not a problem." Naive, but manageable. My stomach dropped. I stood frozen. Every word echoed like a warning I had ignored. I went back upstairs, locked the door, and replayed every interaction in my head. The unexpected visits, the gentle questions, the flowers, the kiss. It wasn't romance. It was a setup. I didn't sleep that night. I barely blinked. I was too numb to cry, too embarrassed to feel angry yet. The next morning, I called in sick and spent hours trying to figure out what he meant by paperwork. I found a listing online. My building was up for sale. It wasn't public yet, but there it was, a pending real estate transaction. The terms mentioned vacant possession by the end of the month. I understood then. He wasn't trying to win my heart. He was trying to keep me quiet, stable, emotionally invested, so I wouldn't cause trouble when the time came to kick me out. When he showed up that evening, I didn't open the door. He knocked for a while, even called my name softly. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, fists clenched, heart racing. Finally, he slid a note under the door. "You okay?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. 2 days later, I asked for a meeting. I didn't scream or cry. I simply said I knew. He didn't bother to deny it. He just looked at me and said, "You were easy to talk to. I didn't mean to hurt you." Like that was supposed to make things better. I walked away without a word. There was nothing left to say. The man I thought was offering comfort had been controlling the story from the start. I wasn't part of his life. I was just part of his plan. I moved out within the week. No formal notice, no explanation. I packed my things in silence, carrying only what mattered. The apartment that once felt like a fresh start had turned into a place of manipulation. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my coworkers. I just disappeared, like I never lived there at all. The day I left, I saw Mr. Raj standing near the front gate, talking to a man in a suit. Probably a realtor. He didn't see me at first. When he finally did, our eyes met briefly. No words were exchanged. He just gave me a slight nod like he expected it. Maybe he did. I didn't care. I kept walking. In the weeks that followed, I stayed with a friend across town. I didn't talk about what happened. Not because I wanted to protect him, but because I was ashamed of how much I let myself believe. People always think betrayal has to be loud, violent, obvious. But the worst kind is the one that hides behind kindness. The kind that makes you feel special while quietly using you for convenience, timing, and silence. Sometimes, I'd catch myself checking my phone, wondering if he'd try to reach out. He didn't. And that made it worse. It confirmed I had only been a step in his process, nothing more. The kiss, the conversations, the small gifts, it was all calculated. I kept replaying the moment I allowed it all to begin. But regret doesn't fix anything. It only lingers. Eventually, I found a new place. Smaller, a little older, but far more peaceful. The landlord is a retired couple who live downstairs. They don't talk much, and that suits me fine. I still carry the weight of what happened, but I also carry something else, a sense of clarity. I learned the hard way how betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes, it comes dressed as comfort. I don't trust easily anymore. I double-check everything, locks, paperwork, even people's words. But I don't blame myself like I used to. I understand now that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's just that some people see it as an opening, a way in, and they exploit it. Mr. Raj probably sold the building, made his profit, and moved on to the next story. Maybe someone else will fall for his charm. Maybe they won't. Either way, I no longer exist in his world. I reclaimed my space, even if it took running from what I thought was safety. Love, when used as a weapon, leaves marks deeper than bruises. But it also teaches. And what I learned is this: my peace isn't something I'll ever trade again. Not for attention, not for affection, and certainly not for someone who only saw me as a temporary role in a plan that was never mine.